This is my prime example of people that's puppet masters trying to control the narrative.
It now appears if she wants to run for supervisor again, it will have to be.
Allegations of extravagant spending and dubious leadership have caused the once dominant political career of Mayor Tiffany Henyard of Dolton, Illinois, to unravel at an unprecedented speed, culminating in a devastating setback during the Thorne Township Democratic Caucus for the 2024 election. Held at the Homewood/Moore Park District Auditorium and led by Illinois State Senator Napoleon Harris, the caucus marked a dramatic shift from the traditional primary process, drawing hundreds of residents eager to witness the political drama. Henyard, who also serves as Thorne Township Supervisor, saw her candidacy declared invalid due to her critical oversight, her failure to include a certified assessor on her slate, effectively disqualifying her and derailing her political ambitions. This procedural misstep, viewed by critics as a long overdue consequence of her alleged mismanagement, delivered a severe blow to her standing, while supporters decried it as a calculated attack by her rivals. The evening's events underscored the growing divisions within the Democratic Party and raised questions about Henyard's ability to recover politically, serving as a stark reminder of the stakes and pitfalls in the volatile arena of local politics. Skeptics of both candidates filled the venue, aware that this gathering could redefine the political landscape of Thorne Township. When the results were announced, the atmosphere was electrified as Illinois State Senator Napoleon Harris clinched the Democratic nomination for Township Supervisor, effectively ousting Mayor Tiffany Henyard from the race. The announcement, met with applause and jubilant cheers, resembled a knockout in a prize fight, rather than a routine political event. Harris delivered his remarks with composure and an air of finality, leaving Henyard visibly shaken and her supporters stunned. Many described the moment as a political mic drop, with Harris walking away triumphant while Henyard seethed in defeat. In a post-event statement, Henyard accused Harris and the Democratic Committee of orchestrating a strategy to block her candidacy, labeling the caucus an unfair process, steeped in voter suppression. While her allegations sparked heated debates, critics dismissed them as the desperate claims of a politician weighed down by controversies that had plagued her tenure as mayor and supervisor. They argued that the caucus, though an unusual method for Thorne Township, adhered to legal procedures and mirrored practices in other Illinois townships. The outcome not only underscored the high stakes, but also signaled a seismic shift in local politics, leaving residents and observers speculating about what lies ahead for these central figures in the dramatic political battle. In a dramatic turn of events that highlighted defiance and division, Tiffany Henyard stormed out of the Homewood/Moore Park District Auditorium, flanked by her most loyal supporters, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere with accusations of corruption and illegality. Directing her ire at State Senator Napoleon Harris, the chair of Thornton Township's Democratic Committee, Henyard accused him of orchestrating an unfair and flawed process, shouting, "You didn't run any of this the right way, legally." Her fiery outburst was more than an expression of frustration. It was a bold statement of defiance aimed at both her critics and the forces that had chipped away at her political standing. The caucus vote that evening, described by many as chaotic, yet decisive, effectively ended Henyard's bid as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor, with her name formally removed from consideration. The removal of Tiffany Henyard's name from the ballot was a public and symbolic blow that underscored her increasingly tenuous grip on power. For Henyard, the loss was more than a procedural setback. It was a deeply humiliating moment played out before an audience of constituents and political adversaries, solidifying her reputation as one of the most polarizing figures in Illinois politics. Despite the decisive nature of the vote, Henyard's determination to fight back remained unshaken. As she exited the auditorium, her supporters rallied around her, echoing allegations of voter suppression and abrupt rule changes allegedly designed to disqualify her ticket. They claimed that capacity restrictions at the venue and procedural shifts prevented many of her backers, including elderly and frail individuals, from participating. Meanwhile, State Senator Napoleon Harris and the caucus organizers, supported by their legal team, dismissed these accusations, asserting that the process adhered to Illinois law and was conducted openly and legitimately. Harris's camp defended the unusual decision to hold a caucus, emphasizing that, while unprecedented in Thornton Township, it was a lawful and effective method for selecting candidates. The decision to hold a caucus, unprecedented in Thornton Township but defended by State Senator Napoleon Harris as a lawful and strategic move used by other Illinois townships, marked a turning point for Tiffany Henyard, forcing her to reevaluate her political future. With her name removed from the Democratic ballot, speculation mounted that she might pivot to run as an independent or even as a right-leaning candidate, an option that, while showcasing her tenacity, risked further fracturing her already divided base. Henyard, known for her blend of controversy and resilience, seemed unlikely to retreat quietly, but the evening underscored the immense challenges she faces in retaining power and redefining her political identity amidst growing scandals that have marred her tenure as mayor of Dolton and Thornton Township supervisor. To her detractors, the defeat was a long overdue reckoning, reflecting her eroding credibility amid allegations of financial mismanagement and self-serving governance. To her supporters, however, the caucus was a political ambush, with accusations of voter suppression and unfair processes framing the event as an orchestrated effort to oust a strong-willed leader. As Henyard left the auditorium, flanked by both loyalists and skeptics, it was clear the battle was far from over. The evening's events not only drew the lines for her next political confrontation, but also symbolized the challenges of a leader whose resilience and defiance define her career, even as they continue to court controversy.
At a caucus works right here in Thornton Township. You could also say that she flunked out because her name is not.
Tiffany Henyard's crushing political defeat sent shockwaves through social media and her constituency, igniting widespread dissatisfaction and amplifying public discontent with her leadership. Critics seized the moment to frame her loss as yet another glaring example of her governance failures, and a clear sign that her grip on power was rapidly slipping. Many residents, already disillusioned by her scandal-ridden and contentious tenure, began voicing their frustrations more openly, fueling a growing demand for political change. One particularly vocal resident took to social media, rallying others to push for her removal as soon as possible, a call to action that resonated deeply within the community. As the chorus of online criticism grew louder, a poignant quote surfaced and gained traction: "The more power someone has, the more corrupt they become," encapsulating the sentiments of many disillusioned voters who now saw Henyard's leadership not just as ineffective but as actively harmful to the very people she was elected to serve. Residents viewed Tiffany Henyard's crushing political defeat as a defining moment that encapsulated the corrosive effects of unchecked authority and the pitfalls of political arrogance. For her critics, Henyard had come to symbolize unbridled ambition spiraling out of control, with what once seemed like confidence now appearing as unmitigated arrogance. Her refusal to acknowledge missteps or take responsibility for the consequences of her constituency only further alienated her constituency. Her dramatic loss served not just as a reaffirmation of her political failings, but as a resounding indictment of a leadership style seen as self-serving, disconnected, and dismissive of community concerns. For months, detractors had raised alarms over allegations of corruption, dubious financial decisions, and poor management practices. But the loss made these accusations harder to ignore. Henyard's inability to inspire confidence or unite her constituency highlighted an administration more focused on personal aggrandizement than addressing the community's real challenges. This sentiment, widely shared across social media and in local conversations, deepened public disillusionment with her leadership and reinforced a growing demand for change. Mistrust in Tiffany Henyard's leadership deepened, reinforcing the perception that she embodied the very problems she was elected to solve. Instead of rallying her community, Henyard's actions and rhetoric seemed to widen the divide between her and the people she governed. Residents increasingly felt alienated, not only by her policies but also by her combative attitude toward criticism and her unwillingness to engage in meaningful dialogue about the issues affecting their lives. Complaints about deteriorating infrastructure, inadequate public services, and financial mismanagement added to the growing frustration. To those demanding accountability, Henyard's defiance in the face of mounting scandals only confirmed their suspicions about her misplaced priorities. Her leadership came to symbolize a dangerous disconnect, entrenched in her own image of authority, seemingly oblivious to the grievances surrounding her. As public outcry grew louder, Henyard's political future appeared more tenuous than ever. What her supporters once saw as resolute determination now seemed like stubborn arrogance, further eroding her credibility and amplifying calls for change. Henyard's obstinacy became increasingly apparent to the wider electorate as her devastating loss at the caucus was not just a symbolic blow, but a clear rejection of her governance. It underscored the growing exhaustion among voters with a leadership style that seemed more driven by personal ambition than by a commitment to the community's welfare. Critics pointed out that Henyard's decisions often left constituents feeling neglected, while her frequent dismissal of public concerns deepened the divide between her administration and the people she served. This alienation was particularly stark in the wake of her defeat, as calls for greater accountability and transparency gained momentum. What had once been a hopeful leadership vision now represented the consequences of political complacency and arrogance. Each new accusation against her, claims of lavish spending, disregard for procedural norms, and financial recklessness, only fueled the public's disillusionment, further diminishing her credibility and support. For those who had once supported Tiffany Henyard, the promise of progress now felt like a broken covenant. To her critics, her tenure had become a cautionary tale of the dangers of misplaced trust. The community's growing frustrations coalesced into a resolute call for accountability, signaling a turning point in the collective desire for political renewal. Meanwhile, Henyard appeared increasingly isolated, her base of support shrinking as each scandal further tarnished her credibility. For a leader who had once prided herself on tenacity and resilience, the stark reality of her diminishing influence loomed large. The disconnect between her and her constituents seemed insurmountable, with her once ironclad authority now fragile, leaving her struggling to maintain relevance in a community that had grown weary of unmet promises and ineffective governance. While she and her staunchest allies might continue to challenge the legitimacy of the process that led to her downfall, it was clear that the electorate's patience had worn thin. With each passing day, the clamor for change grew louder, and the specter of political irrelevance drew ever closer, leaving Henyard's future as uncertain as the controversial legacy she had built.
At the top and self-suburban Dalton.
Of course, we are talking about.
To fully comprehend Tiffany Henyard's dramatic fall from grace, one must first consider her meteoric rise to prominence and the carefully crafted image that positioned her as a rising star in local politics. Initially celebrated as a visionary leader, Henyard secured dual roles as both the mayor of Dalton and the supervisor of Thornton Township, an unusual and powerful combination that elevated her status and cemented her as a figure of immense influence, a super mayor who seemed untouchable. This dual authority not only bolstered her reputation, but also provided a commanding platform for her political ambitions. However, her ascent soon began to unravel as the weight of controversy exposed cracks in her carefully constructed facade. Among the most damaging allegations was the discovery of extravagant spending, including a staggering $33,000 charged to Amazon, supposedly for community purposes benefiting Dalton residents, many of whom earned a median income far below the amount spent. The revelation of $50,000 in extravagant spending struck a particularly discordant note, highlighting the stark contrast between Tiffany Henyard's apparent opulence and the economic struggles faced by those she was elected to serve. These allegations, once unimaginable, unleashed a wave of shock, anger, and betrayal among constituents who had trusted a leader they believed represented their best interests. The community's outrage became palpable as details of Henyard's spending habits unfolded, illustrating what many saw as gross irresponsibility and a disconnection from the realities of her constituents. For residents struggling to make ends meet, the accusations painted a picture of a leader indulging in a lavish lifestyle while neglecting the urgent needs of her community. "It's repulsive that she's living like a queen while we can barely get by," lamented one Dalton resident, capturing the growing resentment among her electorate. These feelings of betrayal fueled a groundswell of disillusionment, sparking calls for accountability and driving an ever-widening wedge between Henyard and the community that had once rallied behind her. Her financial decisions became emblematic of a deeper hypocrisy, highlighting a glaring disparity between her actions and the struggles of those she was supposed to serve. Henyard's promises of service clashed with the self-serving reality that residents began to perceive in her leadership. As scrutiny intensified, the political fallout became unavoidable, exposing the fragility of her once formidable foundation. Allegations of misconduct not only tarnished her reputation, but also served as a stark reminder of how far her leadership had strayed. More even that, her critics grew increasingly vocal, their frustrations amplified by what they saw as the growing hypocrisy and corruption at the core of her administration. What was once a shining image of a champion for the people, a leader celebrated for promises of integrity, transparency, and progress, had been replaced by a narrative of greed and mismanagement. For many, the contrast between her public persona and her apparent private priorities highlighted a betrayal that shook the trust of even her most ardent supporters. The revelations surrounding her alleged misuse of funds marked a pivotal moment in Henyard's political career, driving the erosion of her support base and catalyzing a dramatic shift in public opinion. Residents who had once stood behind her now questioned her leadership, amplifying calls for accountability and change. What once seemed like Tiffany Henyard's promise as a beacon of hope for change has now become a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and self-interest. Her story symbolizes political excess, illustrating the widening gap between the leader she claimed to be and the harsh realities faced by the average Dalton resident. Her critics framed her downfall as an inevitable reckoning, a consequence of leadership mired in scandal and defined by decisions that prioritized personal comfort over the welfare of the community. As the weight of public outrage and mounting allegations bore down on her, the foundations of Henyard's political career crumbled. The same platform that had propelled her rise, built on promises of integrity, service, and advocacy, became the stage for her dramatic fall. The accusations against her not only overshadowed any achievements, but also solidified her legacy as one tarnished by controversy and lost potential. Henyard's failure to address the needs of her community, while engaging in behavior perceived as extravagant and out of touch, deepened the rift between her administration and the people it was meant to serve. The impact of her political demise resonated far beyond her immediate sphere of influence, serving as a cautionary tale of how the pursuit of power, unchecked by accountability, can alienate and betray those it seeks to lead. For Dalton, her downfall was a painful reminder of how political leadership can falter when it loses sight of the very people it was intended to serve. The allegations against Tiffany Henyard became a rallying point for change, reinforcing calls for leadership grounded in humility. Residents expressed that their ability to receive effective services was being severely hindered by unnecessary and politically motivated infighting, which left them feeling frustrated and disillusioned. They were vocal about the negative impact these constant disputes were having on their daily lives, as essential projects were delayed and basic services compromised. The focus had shifted away from addressing the community's pressing needs, with political battles taking precedence instead. Many began questioning whether Henyard, the Democratic candidate for Thornton Township Supervisor, was truly working for the people she represented, or if her actions were driven more by power struggles and personal ambitions. The situation came to a head when Henyard dramatically exited the race in just 7 minutes, a move that underscored the high level of tension and the unraveling of her political career. The financial stakes in this ongoing conflict are immense, with numerous parties involved and the potential for dire consequences if necessary permits are not secured. The renovation project for Blackstone Park is nearing completion, and time is running out. If the deadlines for approvals are missed, taxpayers could be left to pay back money that has already been allocated for the project. This situation highlights a larger issue at play, not just political gamesmanship, but the missed opportunities caused by infighting and ineffective leadership. According to Stephanie Wheatman, executive director of the Park District, the expiring grants and permits are putting vital public benefits at risk. If these grants expire, it would be a lost opportunity for residents to access improved parks and safe spaces for their families. Henyard's confrontational and controlling leadership style has driven wedges within the community, deepening divides and preventing meaningful progress on key projects. Her inner circle, once steadfast in its loyalty, is now beginning to splinter, with longtime allies reportedly pulling away and staff resignations fueling rumors of growing internal conflict. While no formal charges have been brought against her, the FBI's investigation into Henyard continues, adding further pressure to an already fragile situation. The looming FBI investigation represents one of the most damaging blows to Tiffany Henyard's political authority, further eroding the public's trust. Reports from individuals speaking to FBI agents have suggested potential misconduct in her leadership, casting a long shadow over her tenure. The pressure from the investigation has visibly affected her ability to lead, and her political opponents have seized on the indictment of one of her closest allies, a former deputy police officer facing allegations of bankruptcy fraud, to amplify their claims of corruption within her administration. Despite these growing accusations, Henyard has attempted to push back, accusing her critics of orchestrating a smear campaign. In a fiery Facebook video, she defiantly questioned why she was receiving so much attention, asking, "What are they trying to distract you from?" She also vowed to take legal action against those she believes have wronged her. However, it remains unclear whether she has any supporting evidence for these claims. Her dismissive attitude toward those calling out her mismanagement has only served to further alienate her from the public. The ongoing battles and controversies make it clear that Henyard's leadership is under siege, both from external investigations and internal fractures. Tiffany Henyard's political career is facing an unprecedented crisis as internal challenges and external opposition converge, with the stakes higher than ever. Her once secure grip on power is rapidly slipping as each new scandal emerges, delays mount, and essential projects hang in the balance. Attempts to placate the public, such as organizing community events and engaging with media outlets, have backfired, with many accusing her of desperation and insincerity, further tarnishing her public image. These efforts only highlight the growing perception that her leadership is disconnected from the community's needs. Central to her unraveling is her aggressive, domineering leadership style, which has alienated many. The situation has escalated beyond political infighting. It now directly impacts residents, with important grant funding expiring and key projects faltering. The deeper ramifications of her leadership are becoming impossible to ignore as rifts within her inner circle continue to widen, longtime allies step away, and dissatisfaction among staff grows more apparent.